to Slow and Steady, the podcast where you get to follow along as we figure out how to build and run a SaaS. I'm Benedikt, and Brian is out this week camping. Nonetheless, we'll give you an honest peek into our lives as we work on our products and keep the lights on by getting some outside help. Today is June 16th, and this is episode number 45. Today's episode is brought to you by FileInbox. Ever tried to get a file from someone totally technically illiterate? It sucks. But with FileInbox, just send them a link and your files will show up exactly where you need them. My guest today is Ed Freyfogle. Ed is one of the founders of the OpenCage Geocoder and the host of the GeoMob podcast. You might also recognize him from occasional appearances on the Bootstrapped FM podcast, as well as from the stage of MicroConf Europe, where he gave a talk a couple years ago. Originally, he was supposed to speak at FemtoConf, but as we had to cancel it this year, we thought it would be fun to have him on as guest. Hey, Ed, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here. Long-time listener, first time caller.
Guest.
Yeah, first-time guest. So great to be here.
Yeah, very nice of you to join and help out. As I said, Brian is out on a camping trip, so I figured it would be time to get some more guests on the show. And thanks for volunteering.
Well, I was due to speak at FemtoConf in May, and then obviously that got canceled. So it's great that we still get a chance to catch up, and maybe we can talk through some of the things that we were going to talk about at FemtoConf. So,
yeah, absolutely. What was your talk going to be at FemtoConf? Can you give us the?
Yeah, sure. So my talk was going to be about, it came about because of this, because I went to where I last saw you was at MicroConf in Croatia in the autumn, I think in October. And I was sitting there in the audience and, there were lots of good talks over the course of the 2-3 days. But some of the talks I found were very kind of theoretical, which of course you can still kind of learn a lot from them, but they're more like inspirational or, and what I find is that stuff is great, but what I'm looking for is much more practical, pragmatic tips, like actual pragmatic actions that I can take in my business. So I was reflecting on that and I was like, oh, why weren't there more talks like that? And then I realized, well, instead of just complaining about that, I could actually try to do it. And so I started kind of keeping a list of kind of practical, pragmatic tips that we use in our business. And my idea was then I was going to present 50 tips and tricks that we think help us in our business. So that was the idea. Anyway, yeah, so it was a real shame that FemtoConf wasn't going to take place. So I thought maybe I could come on the show and take people through some of the aspects of my talk. Unfortunately, one bit of bad news is you canceled FemtoConf in March, and it was going to be held in May. So at that point, I kind of took my foot off the gas in terms of creating the talk and getting it all polished. So I don't quite have 50 tips. But nevertheless, I have about 25 or so, and that's perfect because then we can talk those through. And if it goes well, we can have another conversation if I keep collecting some tips. So
absolutely, that would be fun. So do you want to jump?
The first thing I was going to say is that like anytime you come across a list like this of tips, and it's always a little bit the case that some won't apply to your business or your type of business or the stage that your business is in, and some of them will be super obvious, and you'll be like, "Oh my God, Ed, you're a moron! This is so obvious." But hopefully, at least a few of the others, you're going to be like, "Oh my God, Ed, that is genius! I'm a moron for not doing that." So basically, the conclusion is we're all kind of morons and learning as we go. So bear all that in mind.
Okay, cool.
Right. So I guess to give a little bit of background about myself. So myself and a partner, we've been running a SaaS business now for about 5 years. And so these are some of the things we've picked up along the way. That's where all of these are ideas that we actually implement ourselves. So it's not just theoretical. I kind of broke them into a couple. My idea was in my talk, I was going to have a couple different categories or types of things. So maybe the first category I'll talk about is billing. So, good. And this is one that kind of, frankly, it frustrates me a lot because often a lot of SaaS companies in the US, they're like, okay, billing, I'll just use Stripe and I'm done. And in my opinion, that's kind of a mistake, and they miss some opportunities. So the first thing that we discovered is that for a lot of our customers, many of our customers are B2B, and for a lot of them, they're not really that of course they want a good price, but they're not super price sensitive. They're super stress sensitive in the sense that, like, if you make it stressful for that guy to process the invoice or process the payment or figure out how to pay or whatever, he'll go to your competitor, even if the competitor is twice as expensive. So you need to make it clear to him it's going to be simple for him to do the payment. And with that, I mean things like dealing with VAT, like, are you VAT registered? And literally on our website, we actually literally have a sample invoice of what the customer's invoice will look like, so that then the customer can say, okay, this company knows how to deal with companies like mine, and this invoice will work, and it's a valid VAT invoice, and I'm not going to have stress about this. It's kind of a big problem. Like for me, with many of the services that we use, once a month I'll get like the Stripe invoice, and it's a huge pain in some ways because they don't have our VAT ID, and then I have stress with my accountant trying to like get this processed correctly, and it really leaves a bad taste in my mouth about this service, even if the service itself is excellent. And so I think it's a really easy way to either delight your customers or piss your customers off, that I think many SaaS founders don't think about at all. And let me give you the most. Or go ahead. Yeah.
I'd probably add to have, like, even having PDF invoices and actually mailing those invoices as attachments are probably also good practices, because what I really hate is when I do taxes and stuff like accounting once a month, I basically have to collect all the invoices. The nicest experience is just to go into my email inbox, search for the provider name, and just like drag the attachment into the folder. But some don't send those invoices, so I end up logging into their website, going to the billing section, and then probably in some cases even printing the page just to get,
or like exporting it as a PDF.
Exporting it as a PDF, and that's as you said, like, that just like makes it more complicated. And
it always annoys you, man. It's 10 minutes of your life you'll never get back, right? And
exactly.
So it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth about that service. But so even if they are mailing the PDF, this is a huge pet peeve of mine. When they send me an invoice once a month and it's named invoice.pdf or 123.4, 12345.pdf. So the next thing I have to do is download it, rename it to a meaningful name, and then get it to my accountant. And it's so tedious and so stupid. And instead they could just name their invoice, like, name of the company, an 8-digit date, like, 4-digit year, 2-digit month, 2-digit day, .pdf, and if they need to have some unique identifier or something, fine, they can have that also. But like, put the name of the company and the date in the invoice, in the file name. I mean,
that makes it so much easier to work with the invoices.
This is not rocket science. The next idea, my next tip was going to be that you should be your own customer. And by that, I don't mean like a theoretical, like, oh, you should build something that you yourself would want to use. I mean, like, literally be your own customer. Like, go to your website, put your credit card into the purchase form, make sure and bill yourself every month. And and behind the scenes, you can set it so you're billed very little or whatever. But like, literally, you are charged every month, and then you yourself get mailed your own invoice. And that way, you truly experience what your customers are doing. And I think not enough people do this. And so I started doing this a couple of months ago, and immediately I found things that could be improved in terms of the wording, in terms of the look and feel of the invoice, all these kinds of things. So it's something I definitely recommend. And that kind of leads me to my next point, which is that your invoice can also be kind of a marketing channel. And you should make sure, what I mean is you should make sure it looks good, your logo looks good on it. In the footer on our invoice, we put things like links to our blog and Twitter, and we're not making it gaudy or whatever. And the core information is the focus of the invoice, but we also know that this is something people are going to look at and use it as a way to judge our company. So it takes 5 minutes to like make it look good. So
do you also use it like to promote stuff on the invoice?
No, we don't promote things, but what we do is of course, it has all the details of our company and our VAT number and all that, but it promotes things like some professional organizations that we're a part of and things like that as a way to add credibility about our company. What we don't, it's not just like a super generic template that just has like, Ed charges you €20 or something. We make it look good and professional.
Nice.
So then, related to that, one of the first things I did after I started billing myself is I sent myself a refund, also to see how that experience works. I don't know if your customers, how often you have to process refunds or anything, but as you grow in number of customers, there will be times you have to do this. So it's good to understand that experience, and that way now, whenever I do it, I'm able to explain to the customer exactly what's going to happen. And I don't do that. I have a template now where I have all that in there, but I'm able to understand that process. So my next tip was one that I've actually spoken about at MicroConf a couple of years ago. It's that you should price in multiple currencies. I don't know. Do you guys do this at your business?
Not right now. No, we just stick to US dollars for now.
But why not, man?
Just probably because like most of our customers are from the US right now, and the overhead.
But don't you
unless you tell me otherwise now?
But is it chicken or egg, right? I mean, is it chicken and egg? I mean, like, if you, of course, most of your customers are from the US because you've designed your website and your service to say we only want US customers by pricing only in dollars. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Might be the case. Like from initial research, it looked like most of our like target audience will be in the US. But that might just be our like prejudices and just like the bubble we're in.
Yeah. I don't know.
Until now, to be honest, I didn't really consider switching it up because I feel like we have so many other things on our plate.
Well, that's just it. It's not difficult though. It's not hard. It's just you.
How do you do it?
Well, you just create a new price in Stripe, and actually Stripe just kind of changed their structure to make it even easier. But Stripe handles all that. They just so the customer goes to the site. We look at his IP address to determine which country he's in. Then, based on that, we set the price to the default for that country. I mean, we don't do hundreds of currencies. We just do 5 or 6. So, like you in Germany, if you went to our website, you would see the prices in euro. And then when you purchase, your card is billed in euro. Then Stripe handles that. Stripe then converts it into our currency and pays us. That's all.
Okay.
But the issue is you as a customer. I mean, we have many customers who comment about that and say that they, and they always choose the currency, their native currency. So, if you're not charging the customer in their currency, you're basically adding to the bill, right? Because then they have to pay a currency conversion fee. So you're making your service more expensive.
Yeah, makes sense. How do you determine the prices? Like, do you charge like the same, like basically just change the unit?
No. I mean, it's roughly the equivalent value. So in our cheapest plan in US dollars is $50, and for that we charge €45.
Okay.
Obviously, the currency rates, the exchange rates fluctuate very slightly, but some go up, some go down. So we just kind of keep it constant at that. Like, I don't worry at all about, am I getting the optimal price? It's more about, am I getting a new customer?
Yeah, right? Makes sense. But you still allow people to choose the currency, right?
Yeah, they can choose, although it defaults to the currency of their country.
Okay. I remember.
Many people from, let's say, smaller countries, they often comment on this. I mean, you live in Germany, right? So Swiss people obviously are used to paying for things in euro, but they love it if they can pay in Swiss francs.
Sure. Yeah.
So, and again, it's not hard. Or like Canadian dollars is another example. Almost all of our Canadian customers comment on the fact that we don't make them pay in US dollars.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a very simple way to make the customer happy. So I don't want to belabor that because I've talked about that at length at MicroConf. So, but another key point is I think once you get past any sort of volume, you should basically not try to be doing these invoicing and things like that yourself. We use a service called Quaderno, also for the correct calculation of VAT rates and things like that. And they're excellent. It's very good. It's a little bit of effort to get it set up, but then it's great. And it's just really, I never worry about it. I think I'm sure they have competitors as well that are likewise also good. But this is something like it continually baffles me that Stripe hasn't figured out how to do European VAT invoices. It's just not correct. So so what I would recommend to everyone is that you use, once you get any kind of meaningful volume, you should switch to using a service like that. Also, in terms of the accounting, it's much simpler.
So. They do like exports of like all the VAT.
Yeah, so the way it works is at the end of the month, so on the first day of the new month, I just do an export of all of our sales, CSV file, sales and refunds, and then I just give that to our accountant and it's done. It's one file. It's super simple. Right. So another key tip is that you should definitely let your customers set up 2 email addresses for your service. One for actually using the service and I guess the product or whatever, but one also for all billing related matters. Because at least in our case, many of our customers are software developers, and they interact with the technical aspects of our service, but they don't really want to have anything to do with the billing and things like that. So you can save everyone a lot of stress by making sure the correct email goes to the correct party, and otherwise you're always we were for the first couple of years we would always get support requests where people are like, Bob in accounting needs the invoice from 6 months ago. Please, can you send it to him or whatever? So
yeah,
it's just kind of a nightmare.
That reminds me, I recently came across a cool feature. I think it was on AppSignal's sign-up process. And usually during the sign-up process, you have to enter a credit card. And they also had a button in there where you could get a link to an unprotected page with just the credit card form. So you could send it to someone in your company and just ask them to enter the credit card details in there without you ever having a card in your hands and doing it on that form during the sign-up process.
Oh, right, gotcha. Yeah, that
felt pretty smart.
That does feel pretty smart. That's not a bad idea, although we don't ask for a credit card up front. But yeah, sometimes there is that problem, the dichotomy between the user of the service and the person who pays for the service. All right, I get 2 more kind of billing related tips. The other next tip I have is if you're using Stripe, as I assume many people are. One of my biggest pet peeves with Stripe is that their fees are not really transparent. I mean, they are transparent. If you go to their site, you can look at the fees, but those are the fees that apply on like day one. But as soon as you get any kind of significant volume, they'll give you a discount if you ask for it, or not if you don't ask for it. So it's kind of annoying, but basically you have to ask Stripe. If your revenue is growing, you should keep asking them for discounts. So, and I think,
how easy is that process?
Well, it's pretty easy that you just send an email. Obviously, then you gotta, then you gotta wait for an answer or whatever. And sometimes they might say yes, and sometimes they might say no. But the cost of sending the email is pretty low. But it's one of my biggest peeves with the service is that they should be transparent about what kind of discounts you can get as you go up in volume, rather than. Because like on the one hand, if you email them and they give you the discount, you're like, great, I got a discount. On the other hand, you're like, well, this is super annoying. Why didn't I ask 3 months ago or whatever? Yeah. So
do you have a gut feeling where the threshold is in terms of like MRR or something like that?
I don't know. If you go over 10,000, I would ask. If you go over, I kind of like, it probably varies from country to country or currency to currency, I guess. And I think it varies a lot based on the nature of your customers. Like if you have a lot of chargebacks and how people are paying you, like how expensive that is, So maybe that's why they don't do it, because it's not completely clear. But obviously they have some kind of procedure for figuring out whether you should get a discount or not. And anyway, if you do have any meaningful volume, you should ask for a discount. So
good tip.
And then the next point is, this is actually kind of a cool feature of Stripe that I only recently discovered, actually. So Stripe will send these emails for you with the invoices or whatever on your behalf, or the payment failed or whatever. You can, it's kind of buried deep in the settings, but you can configure that so that those emails are coming from your domain, which I think is probably a good thing to do in terms of it gives the customer more of the impression that they're interacting with you rather than with Stripe. So it's very trivial to set up. It takes you have to create various DNS entries, but it takes like 10 minutes. So probably something you should do.
Are you using that, or are you just like?
Yeah, we use that. Although we don't have Stripe send emails, the invoices on our behalf, because we use this other service, but we do use them for things like if a payment fails, the customer will get an email and things like that. So
makes sense.
So that's kind of it for the round of billing tips. I don't know. You got any billing, invoicing kind of tips, Benedikt? I'm always keen to learn new things, new tips and tricks.
Well, you had a lot of good tips, so I don't have anything major to add. Did you recently check out Stripe's PDF invoices?
No, I haven't. I haven't actually. Maybe I probably should.
I'm not saying that they are as good as Quaderno's, but at least like for us with Userlist, they're at least good enough. So we decided to just use them directly.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, we're a US company, so VAT is not really a concern for us right now. So I didn't really evaluate the invoices on that in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, one of the good things about Quaderno is we increasingly have customers who don't want to pay via credit card, especially bigger customers. They want to pay by bank transfer, and so we need to send them an invoice kind of outside of the Stripe ecosystem. I mean, I guess maybe you could do that with Stripe regardless, but we have more and more customers who are just paying by bank transfer,
which makes sense.
Which also has its own difficulties, but the good thing about it is it's very cheap. We don't have there's no transaction fee.
Yeah.
So,
do you do that for every customer, or is it like only for like annual contracts or something like that?
Yeah, only for only above a certain value. So either an annual contract or a very large monthly contract. It's a pain. I mean, usually these are big companies, and it can be a real pain to get it set up. I mean, usually these are companies where the accounting departments, you got to get a purchase order number and stuff like that. So it can take a while, but then once you do get it set up, it usually runs smoothly. So it can be worth it. Because I mean, there's no an example like that. If someone's paying you $1,000 a month, or let's say €1,000 a month, the Stripe fee on that would be like €20. I mean, there's no reason to pay Stripe €20 every month for that.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, that adds up. So
cool. So that's all your billing related tips.
Yeah, that's all the billing related tips. I have some of the other groups that I have are one marketing tip that we found, and maybe this is only applicable to us because our customer group is software developers, but one marketing channel that I think people often overlook is GitHub. And I don't mean advertising on GitHub or anything. I'm not even sure that's possible, but README files on GitHub. So we have many different projects on GitHub of different projects that either related to our software or open source projects that we run or contribute to. And having a well-designed README file that explains who you are, what you do, has links to your service, and things like that can be a great channel of ongoing traffic. It's not particularly difficult. And so now we just have a template kind of that we put into every every one of our projects, and it works well.
That's a cool idea. I might steal that.
Well, again, most of these ideas are not from me. I've just stolen them or aggregated them from other places. So if you do a search on, do a search for like good README file, you'll find many sites that will give you lots of very good tips on how to customize your README file to make it attractive. Cool. Moving on to some product tips. Maybe this is again. So some of these are tips, and some are just rants about my own experience using some products. So, so our service, for example, is only in English, but very often I live in Spain, in Barcelona, and very often when I go to different sites, they try to force me into using Spanish, and it's super annoying. It's really, really annoying. And it immediately gives me a bad opinion of the product because like my browser is not, I have my browser in English and my computer's in English. Like I don't want to, the only thing
location doesn't mean language.
Right? Exactly. So I really recommend anyone out there who's doing this, you should stop. What you should do is, and because one of the reasons I make this point is, I live in Barcelona where many people, their language is Catalan, not Spanish. And it's kind of almost, it's a source of quite a bit of tension. So it can really be a negative to set someone's language the wrong way. So what you should definitely do is, first of all, if the user is registered and with your service and told them which language they prefer, you should always use that. But secondly, if they haven't registered, if they're just a visitor to your site, you should obey their browser on the assumption that they've configured their browser with the language they want, whatever language that is. And only as an absolute last-ditch default would I base anything on location.
So, that's a good tip.
Okay, another kind of product tip or on the feedback side of things. So feedback is quite important, or let's say customer support is a kind of important issue for us because we're quite a small team and we have a fair number of users. And so it's, if we're not careful about it, it can really get out of hand. And so we, one very, very small subtle tip on your feedback form or whatever method you give people to get in touch with you, just clearly state then like what times you work and how long it's going to take for you to get back to them.
Yeah.
Like, like on our feedback form, our team is based here in Europe and we just say, look, we're based in Europe. We work on European hours. So, if you're in Australia, then the guy knows, all right, I'm not going to get an answer quickly. I'm going to, it might take 8 hours or 12 hours or whatever. And then he's calm. But there's nothing worse than someone who's like irate because they're not getting an answer or has the expectation they're going to get an answer very quickly and then they don't. And so then it can quickly spiral out of control. So very, very small, simple, easy thing to do, but many people I see don't do it.
Good tip.
So another tip, again, as a small team, we one of the biggest problems you can have is kind of decision fatigue, right? Because every day you're having to decide all these different things about every aspect of your business. And so one tip one policy that we follow is to try to define policies for things so that we don't need to decide them again and again. So a good example is we often get asked, we're quite active in the OpenStreetMap community or in various software communities. And often we get emails from people asking us, will we sponsor a conference? Okay. And, instead of what you don't want to do is then every single time be like, well, this is kind of a good cause or, this is a friendly person and maybe I should sponsor it, but how much should I sponsor it or whatever? Like we just have a blanket policy. Like if a member of the team is attending the conference, then, if it's affordable, we will sponsor. If not, no, that's it. And like, I never need to, because I get emails from people, I guess once you've sponsored a few conferences, people are like, oh, this company sponsors, so let me hit them up. And it's a nightmare because then we continually get, very often from very worthy causes, and I'm sure they're great conferences or whatever that I would love to attend. But if we're not going to be able to attend, then we just say, look, sorry, we're not attending. We don't sponsor conferences. We're not attending. Sorry. But that's just an example of one of the kind of like policies we try to set so that we never have to waste time making a decision. We just, Because I think
not have to make the same decision or a similar type of decision over and over again.
Exactly. And as a very small team, maybe it's similar for you guys, but it's so easy to get burned out by having to constantly like decide everything.
Yeah.
It really weighs on you. At the end of the day, you're just fried and you're like, I didn't really do anything today, but it's because you were having to decide constantly.
Yeah, that's true. What we also found is that like just having a set of core values core values also helps a lot with decision making. For example, when something just doesn't align with one of your values, it's easy to say no to it and have a good excuse.
Yeah, I would agree with that. All right, so some other tips that we have more about general, like kind of ways to work. I try to be this works for me, I don't know if it works for everyone, but I try to be quite consistent in having a schedule in terms of, again, as a founder or as a member of a very small team, it's so easy to get caught up in the highs and lows of your business of like, when it's going well, you're super enthusiastic, and then you want to work like, you're like, oh, let's launch this, let's do that. And when it's going badly, you're like, oh my God, this is never going to work. Like, why am I wasting my time on this? But you got to try to even those highs and lows out and just be consistent. I think I really think that's critical for mental health. So, I try to have a schedule, work a certain number of hours a week, and then let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah,
so,
that's a good tip as well. Yeah, that helps for me as well. Like I try to stick to a schedule too. Just like have some sort of regular working hours, and also explicitly try not to work outside of them, unless if there's an emergency, sure. But I usually try to end the day at a certain time and then stop thinking about work just to get some rest.
Very difficult to stop thinking, but at least, even if you are thinking about it, you don't have to sit at the keyboard. So it's good to not do that.
Yeah, that's true. Like the thinking part is hard to stop, but at least not executing on every idea you have makes it easier to get in a different mindset and just relax a little bit.
Yeah. All right, another habit that we have, or let's say policy that we have that I think has really paid off for us is you have all these tasks that are kind of important but not urgent, right? Where you need to do them, but there's kind of a pain. And so like a good example is like upgrading all your software, right? Like on your servers or whatever, or like reviewing the security of everything. Obviously, it's a very important thing, but it's always like, oh, I got to launch this other thing or whatever. Or, as a founder, like reviewing your costs. How often should you review your costs of how your business is? Or like backups. How often should I back everything up? So again, it's very easy to like either delay all these things or do them on a very ad hoc schedule, which means you probably overlook them sometimes or whatever. So what we do is we very systematically set aside days each month, or depending on the topic, once a quarter, we have a day. So we'll have like backup day. And we just put it in the calendar, once a quarter, where we review our backups. Are the backups working? Are we able to restore from the backup? And we have a very, a documented list of these are the things we do on backup day. And as a result, then I know, okay, I can have confidence our backups work. Or upgrading day, so we have a day where we just go through all, and again, we have a list because now we've done it many times, many quarters. But we have a list of on upgrade day, the first thing we do is upgrade, these packages. Then we upgrade these servers. Then we do this and that. And we try to be quite systematic about all these kinds of tasks they're very important, but they're really not glamorous. Right. But they're really easy also to neglect. Because of that, they're easy to neglect, or you're like, oh, I'm too busy rolling out this new feature or whatever. But the problem is I'm a huge believer in SaaS of maybe for this expression, right? That the long game is the shortcut. And I really think it's true. Like you can't force things to go faster. So the best thing you can do is build good habits and be diligent and don't let yourself burn out. And then, the machine will build its own momentum. Of course, you still need to like go out and get your customers and things like that. But what you can't do is, you flailing wildly isn't going to make it happen. So
yeah. Related to that, or actually the schedules and the notes, what do you use to keep like all your lists and documentation and internal notes and knowledge?
Text files.
Just text files?
Yeah, we just use text files. I mean, in our team, everyone's an engineer, and we just edit text files that we have in Git. I mean, I don't really think which tool you use is at all important. The main thing is that you have one system. There's another great expression is one bad way is better than two good ways. A huge believer in that. So obviously text files have a lot of negatives to them, but it works, and we stick to it. And it's not that I'm dogmatic about it. If someone in the team were like, "Oh my God, we should definitely switch to Notion," fine, we can have a discussion. And then if we decide we all switch to Notion or whatever, or Google Docs or whatever, then we do it. But what we don't do is like some stuff in one system, some stuff in another system, that's not going to work.
Yeah, that's true. Like having one central location for all your notes and stuff. That's really important. Yeah,
absolutely.
Fully agree.
And obviously you need to adapt it to your team. So like in our team, everyone's a software engineer, so text files are very easy. Obviously, if that's not how your team works, then you should use a different tool. But so what else we got? Another tool that I don't want to too blatantly proselytize for one specific tool, but the Calendly. I love Calendly. I think it's crazy that not everyone is using Calendly. So my life has improved a lot since I started using Calendly, even though I do my best to try to avoid meetings and things like that, and I actually have quite few. But for things like scheduling when you're going to meet up with someone or have a call with someone, it just saves so much time and energy. Highly recommend it. What other tips do I have here? Related to our point about where to keep your notes and things, I highly recommend from the day you start your company that you kind of keep a clean data room. And again, the data room can just be like folders on Dropbox or whatever, but like it really pays to keep your shit organized. Like, don't have your accounting in your Gmail inbox with 2,000 other emails, along with like some stuff's on Dropbox and some stuff. Like, have a coherent structure where you put your things. I've met many founders who don't do this, or they're more like, "Oh, I'll get to it when I get to it," and or once a quarter they try to organize their stuff. And I just think it's such a haphazard approach. Maybe that's more of a personality thing, but this is really the kind of thing where, like, if you set it up correctly at the beginning, it's easy, and if you try to have to implement it afterwards, it's so painful. So painful.
Yeah, and I think that goes hand in hand with like your accounting day, security day, backup day. If you just like do this on a regular basis and keep everything in one location and just like be strict about it, it's so much easier than having to figure it out for an entire year or whatever after the fact. So
exactly.
It's a lot easier to do it in small increments than it is to do it in one big daunting research project of where are all our invoices.
Well, and then another thing on a related note, I guess this depends which stage you're on, but sometimes I come across people who they're just starting and they're like, "Oh, this is just kind of a side project," and they mix the accounting and the money of the side project with their personal accounting. That's a very bad idea. Very, very bad idea. But I know it's tempting because you're like, "Oh, well, who knows if this project is going to work out or whatever."
Yeah.
But as soon as it's at all viable, you should separate your finances from the project finances. I think otherwise you're just begging for problems.
That's true.
And a similar one on that note is, I guess, again, I'm going to recommend a service here, is Baremetrics. And I know they have several competitors. I know Chart Mogul some people use, and what's the other one?
Profitwell.
Profitwell, yeah. And I think they all have their pros and cons and unique features or whatever. But really, I would recommend anyone, once your business gets over a certain critical mass of, I don't know what that would be, but maybe it's $1,000 MRR, $5,000 MRR. You should definitely be using a service like that rather than wasting any time trying to calculate stuff like this on your own.
Yeah, for sure.
I tried at the beginning, with like the clunky Excel spreadsheet, and then it just doesn't. It's just a terrible, terrible use of your time when you could just instead use one of these services and save yourself so many hours, and you're less likely to make a mistake. So
yeah, that's true. Especially once things get more complicated with people being on a lot of different plans, maybe having discounts and like
exactly
at some point
exactly.
It's just unmanageable to do this in the spreadsheet on your own from month to month.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you have people paying on different schedules, and some paying via credit card, some paying via invoice, all kinds of different things. So, the final tip I have, let me see if I've overlooked anything. I think that's kind of two final tips. Again, one is more kind of a mental health tip, but I find it quite enjoyable I set little goals for myself in the business, but then also with very tangible rewards of kind of, things I do. And the rewards don't have to be like, massive, it's not like I'm a vacation to Hawaii or something, but like, it might just be like you go to a nice restaurant or something, but you should really reward yourself as you achieve things. Otherwise, it's very easy to gloss over the achievements. It's very easy to just be like, whenever you hit a milestone, like maybe your milestone is like, oh, we got to get to $1,000 MRR. And then you get there and immediately you're like, oh my God, now we can get to 2,000, right? And you've really got to make sure you take the time to celebrate, because otherwise you get, it's gone like that. So
do you make plans ahead of time, like how you're going to celebrate a specific goal?
Yes, I do. I mean, like certain things that I'm going to like buy myself, or which restaurant I'll go to, or whatever. And it can be frustrating too. Like I have this one thing that I want to buy when we hit a certain goal, and like now because of the virus, it's kind of it's been a rocky road, and I'm like, oh shit, I should just buy it. And I'm like, no, I'm going to wait until so it does make every customer cancellation hurt a little bit more, because then it's not about the money, but it's like, oh, we're farther from the goal. But it's going to make it even sweeter when we hit the goal. So
definitely.
And then anyway, my final recommendation is that you should, even, most bootstrap businesses, you don't have investors or anything like that, but I highly recommend you take time every month or on some kind of predictable schedule. So maybe it's quarterly or whatever, where you write an email to some advisors, where you, like a one-page email where you kind of outline your key metrics and what you accomplished and what you're going to accomplish, what you're going to try to accomplish in the coming period. And I find this so useful as a way to organize your thoughts, and also particularly like in my case, it's not just my business. I have a co-founder, and the act of writing this forces us to get into agreement. Every month we have to say, okay, what are the top 3 things we're working on? And very often, so we do send it to like, I don't know, 10 or so advisors, and sometimes they'll have useful feedback or whatever, and sometimes they don't. But the reality is most of them, they don't know the ins and outs of our business, but it's the act of writing the update that creates the value. And it forces my co-founder and I to get on one page with our ideas and make sure that, the worst case is like, I'm focused on doing A and he's focused on doing B, and we don't realize that we're working in different directions. Which is actually very easy to do. It's very easy to do because everyone kind of focuses on their specialty, or and it's done with the best of intentions. Like you think, oh, if I just make this a little bit faster or better, or add this feature or whatever, the business will. But for your business to succeed, particularly as a small bootstrap business, there's so many things you could be working on. It's really critical that as a small team, you're pulling in the same direction and on an agreed goal. I guess you guys have this a bit. It's probably one of the benefits of being in Tiny Seed, huh? Is that they force that kind of structure on you.
We just sent like a couple of days ago out our first like investor update for the month. But we also included a couple of people outside of outside of Tiny Seed, and will be a new habit that we're.
And was it hard to write the update or no?
To be honest, I myself didn't write it. Jane did most of the writing, but it was a good way to just to recap what happened in the last month and what problems we hit or what milestones we hit, and just reflecting on that was insightful as well.
Well, now the longer you do it, and in 2 years or whatever, you can go back and look at it and you're like, oh my God, you remember when we were worried about these silly little problems, and it's really funny to go back and look at them, actually.
Yeah, I can imagine that will be good, a good documentation of the company's history and the small problems you used to worry about a year ago.
Anyway, these are some of the tips that a few of the kind of pragmatic little tips that I found helpful in our business. So I would love if people suggest their own. I'm always keen to learn new ideas and get some new ways of working. So if anyone has any ideas of things, no matter how small, no matter how mundane, that would improve the business, help you run it in a lower stress way, would love to hear.
Yeah, what's a good way to reach out to you?
Well, the best way is probably on Twitter. Freyfogle is my handle, or you can check out, ping me via our business, which is opencagedata.com. So hopefully you put those in the show notes.
For sure, yeah. So. Cool. Well, that was a really amazing episode. I feel like I kept nodding along. I think there wasn't one tip in there that was like, nah, yeah, that's whatever. So thanks for compiling this list and sharing it with us. Maybe like in a couple of months we can have you on for a second one.
Yeah, maybe I'll have to keep
with all the new stuff.
I'll have to keep my list, and but better would be hopefully next year, maybe at FemtoConf I can present it, and then I'll have it. I have all 50 as a real presentation with some screenshots and stuff. So
yeah, that's still on. Like planning to make it happen next year. So yeah, thanks for taking the time. Thanks for sharing all these tips with us, and it was nice talking to you.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.